We don't need to go down that route.
I've been down that road with him before, and it's like it's harder to get those numbers out of him than a bash bill out of Jimmy Russell. So.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 185 of Bourbon Pursuit. This one is named Famous Staves. Get it? Get it? Think about it. It's the pun. All right. Anyway, let's go ahead, talk about a little bit of the news and what's been going on. We have wrapped up our first two barrel picks of 2019. We did not one, but two barrels at Four Roses and another at Buffalo Trace. If you want to see the pictures as well as some of the stories that go along with it and how we even came away with two barrel picks, go and check out our public blog posts over at patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit. And as always, thanks again to our partner, Keg and Bottle, out of the San Diego and SoCal area for making this possible. Make sure you visit their site at kegnbottle.com, and you can shop over 700 different whiskeys that can be shipped direct to your door. Buffalo Trace issued a press release stating more than 230,000 people visited in 2018. It's a 15% increase in visitation over 2017 and a 345% increase since 2010. And to be honest, I can totally believe it. We were there on Monday and saw about 10 tours in the matter of the 3 hours that we were there. In addition, you can tell things are getting pretty crazy when people are at Buffalo Trace at the opening of the day waiting for Blanton's to hit the shelf. We saw someone come out, restock the shelf, and our entire group looked at the people that were running over there like they were nuts. One of our members on the selection team even said, you might be a little too deep into bourbon when finding Blanton's on the shelves. Maybe it doesn't even excite you anymore. That's funny because it's true. For Patreon supporters, make sure you go and you purchase your Pursuit series. Episodes 3 through 7 are available for purchase, and you can go and you can check out the directions on how you access them through our Patreon post. And if you aren't a Patreon community member, all of the remaining bottles will be open to the public in the next week or two. So stay tuned to our social channels because there's going to be a handful that will make their way out. Now, today's episode, it's another Bourbon Pursuit exclusive. I remember when Ryan and I launched this podcast back in March of 2015, and we were trying to find interesting guests and topics. And we fired off an email to Independent Stave, and we would do it maybe every 6 months. And we just wanted somebody to come on the show and talk about the cooperage, talk about the science and everything behind it. And for years, we kept getting denial emails. But then one email from Fred to Brad, and then we're in like Flint. So Brad, who would actually rather be called just a barrel maker and not a CEO, rarely does any media coverage whatsoever. So we're ecstatic that we get to capture not only his family story, but how they actually take customer service at Independent Stave to the extreme, and how they also continue to invest in research and development that pushes the bounds of today's bourbon. We had a chance to tour the facility, and if you're in the Loretto area, maybe visiting a place called Maker's Mark, put this as a stop. You can actually see how the barrels are made and see their entire process. They don't typically advertise their visitor center experience much, but now you know there is another place you can get more information and another aspect of bourbon production when you're making your pilgrimage to Kentucky. Now, if you're interested in learning more about our private label bourbon Pursuit series, head on over to pursuitspirits.com and see what they're all about. We're continually trying to bring more excellent barrel-proof bourbons and ryes to the market, and you can get all the details on how they're shipped directly to your door on our website. Now with that, enjoy this week's episode. Here's Fred Minnick with Above the Char.
I'm Fred Minnick, and this is Above the Char. On a short family vacation, I stood in long lines, climbed stories of stairs with my little boy clinging to an inner tube. We dodged barefooted 5-year-old sprinters chasing siblings and plunged into the cool depths of Great Wolf Lodge, an indoor water park near Cincinnati. It was child heaven. Ice cream, donuts, pizza, so many water slides, and an arcade fit for the SpongeBob lover, with just enough hoops and bowling to keep a dad happy. However, when it came time to dining, I was depressed. Oh, they had all the chicken nuggets and ketchup for the kids, and the food was okay. But the bar menu felt like one of those grungy pickled egg places. They had a couple beers and bourbons, not fully appreciating their proximity to the Commonwealth of Bourbon, aka Kentucky. In addition, the bar didn't seem to accommodate anything more than opening a beer. When my wife asked for a daiquiri, the server commented about the blender working, so they should be able to make one. Now, any cocktail lover knows that this is the telltale sign that the bar cannot make true craft cocktails. The daiquiri is the one classic everybody should be able to make. And hey, we're here for the kids, not the drinks. So I turned my inner critic voice off and ordered a Yuengling draft. It came, I sipped, I returned it, and quickly asked for a Yuengling from the bottle. The draft beer just tasted off, pulling out the temporarily furloughed inner critic. Now I was just looking for things to not like. You know how that is. And I didn't have to look far. My eyes scanned the menu and found a dessert that made me cringe and my neck veins bulge. In big, bold black print, they touted a warm, brown sugar bourbon brownie caramel with vanilla ice cream. It was called the Bourbon Trail Brownie. Bourbon Trail is a trademark owned by the Kentucky Distillers Association. And while I don't expect people to think of trademarks when creating menus, I do hope they at least carry a prominent amount of bourbons. I seethed with anger over this. How dare they use bourbon's brand equity when they just don't even care about bourbon? I wondered why this bothered me so badly. After all, the Bourbon Trail Brownie was just a dessert menu item at a kid's theme park. And it hit me. When I see the word bourbon, I don't think of the luscious spirits. I think of my friends Jimmy Russell, Fred Noe, Wes Henderson, Eric Brown, Greg Davis, Chris Morris, and the original duo of Bourbon Pursuit, among others. I think of you, the bourbon fan, and the 231,000 visitors Buffalo Trace had last year, and the 1.5 million on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail. And when you put it like that, a fellow can get downright protective. You might say, I consider bourbon a part of my family. And that's this week's Above the Char. Are you watching my Amazon Prime show, Bourbon Up? Go check it out on Amazon Prime. It's Bourbon Up. Until next week, cheers.
Ed Bly and Rising Tide Spirits are back again with a new release of Old Stubborn Bourbon. And this release of Old Stubborn is a premium hand marriage of 10, 11, and 12-year cask strength, barely filtered pot still bourbon. It comes in at a staggering 123.8 proof. And the flavoring grain for this one, which the last one was wheated, but this time it's now rye. Rich, sweet, and bold with a long finish that's sure to be another eye-opener. You can order online at Sealbox or thebourbonconcierge.com, and you can even purchase in person at Revival Vintage Spirits, and even now with very few select stores in Kentucky. You can get it now while you can, but be sure to do it because it's not going to last long. Do you ever pour yourself a bourbon, swirl it around, and then start struggling to come up with tasting notes? And perhaps you're also looking for a good Father's Day gift idea. Well, you can now solve both with a kit from Knows Your Bourbon. And unlike other nosing kits on the market, Knows Your Bourbon kits feature real ingredients for the most authentic aromas. You can smell real Tahitian vanilla bean instead of some synthetic aroma that's just made from chemicals. So head on over to knowsyourbourbon.com and enter code BP10 for 10% off your order. From their bar to yours, Chad and Sarah of the popular YouTube channel It's Bourbon Night bring you their favorite at-home old-fashioned mix with the new Elemental Elixir's Golden Hour Syrup. It's a custom-made syrup with notes of bold black tea, warm spices, and orange zest. All you need is your favorite whiskey and ice. No bitters needed. One bottle makes 16 drinks, so that's only $1 a cocktail before you add your own whiskey. They can also be enjoyed in other cocktails or spirits, mocktails, coffee, tea, and anything you can think of. It's crafted locally in Lexington, Kentucky, and you can get your bottle now at whiskeyambitions.com. Always find what you love at Total Wine & More. With so many great bottles to choose from at the lowest price, it's easy to find your favorite Cabernet or a new single-barrel bourbon to try with some help from one of their friendly guides. And with every bottle comes the confidence of knowing you just found something amazing. With the lowest prices for over 30 years, find what you love and love what you find only at Total Wine & More. Curbside pickup and delivery available in most areas. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Spirits not sold in Virginia and North Carolina. Drink responsibly and be 21.
Play Whiskey Wednesday, Round 11, the memory game. Until June 26, each week you could win one of our 12 incredible grand prizes. Select 2 doors at checkout. And if they match on drawing night, you'll win that bottle. Not a match? No worries. You still score a Weller 12-year. Every $5 ticket gives you 5 chances to win, including 4 weekly bonus prizes. Get your tickets now at give270.org. Charitable Gaming License ORG 0002703.
Welcome back to the episode of Bourbon Pursuit, the official podcast of Bourbon. Kenny and Fred took a little bit of a road trip to Lebanon, Kentucky today to kind of figure out we try to get a lot of the facets of everything that goes into bourbon, right? We've talked to distillers, we've talked to blenders, we've talked to finance folks, and now we're talking to the barrel makers.
Absolutely. Cooperages are the most important aspect of the bourbon industry that probably doesn't get enough attention. You know, the distillers always talk about how the barrel will, basically create 50 to 75% of the flavor for every product. But who's making those barrels? Who are the people behind the barrels?
Yeah, not only that is, I think, we got to have just a quick tour of this location, and it's amazing because you think, well, isn't this just an industry that, don't change it. Everything's fine. You make a barrel, you smoke it, you get it out there, put some whiskey in it. And we got to go and we got to see, there's all kinds of crazy experiments. They're doing things. They're slashing barrels up. They're toasting at different levels to bring different flavor characteristics out of it. I mean, it's amazing that there's still this much innovation that goes into it, because at some degree, it doesn't matter what distillery you're talking to, everybody's trying to innovate. They're trying to do something different.
Yeah, everybody wants to stand out. And one of the best ways to stand out in American whiskey is through the barrel. For a long time, people were just adding flavoring and saying they have a new flavored whiskey. Well, that market kind of went away, and the truer market, the more long-term, sustainable market of good quality whiskey, stood out. And how do you get that good quality whiskey? Everybody asks. Well, in a lot of ways, the barrel is 50 to 75% of that answer.
Because you got to get those caramels, those leathers, those cocoa nibs, or whatever you can find out of there.
You got to dip deep into the vanillin of that wood and pull out the wood sugars.
There's the first good actual term that we got in the podcast today. So let's go ahead and introduce our guest. So today we have Brad Boswell. Brad is the CEO and also the 4th generation cooper, or he just likes to call himself a barrel maker at Independent Stave Company. So Brad, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you.
So before we kind of kick it off and talking about experiments, about the barrels and everything like that, talk about sort of growing up or building this industry, kind of talk about how you got introduced into it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the business. I say I'm a 47-year veteran of the business. So all my life, I grew up in the business. Probably age 9 was my first job working for my father and my grandfather, stacking staves in the stave yard. Well, we were kind of stacking staves. We were also making little, forts out of our staves, and people probably had to pick up more than it was actually worth. But we enjoyed stacking staves in the stave yard. I remember cleaning the truck shop when I was a kid, and just from age 9 on, I'd work 4 hours a week when I was 9. Just show up for work once a week. Then when I'm 10 or 11, it's 8 hours, and 12 or 13, it's 16 hours. And eventually, by the time I went to college, I was working, whether it was in maintenance or on the production lines, 40 hours a week during the summers, and just learning everything about the business from the harvesting of the trees all the way to the, loading the trucks or visiting clients, at distilleries.
I was building forts with blankets on top of couches, and you're sitting here doing a barrel staves. It just sounds way cooler than what I was doing.
When you were 8 or 9, did you have a feeling of your family's legacy in the cooperage industry?
Well, I'd always grown up around like most family businesses, around the dinner table, talking about barrels, talking about the business. So, it was pretty much omnipresent in what we did around our house and with my grandparents. And I think I knew that our family were barrel makers. There's no doubt about it. That's what we did. It wasn't questionable. We made barrels and we loved doing it. I think it was great because growing up as a child, when I went to work or went to the cooperage or to the stave mill, it was usually a positive experience. Something we had fun doing, and maybe we weren't working as efficient as we should have, but we were still working and having fun doing it. My dad loved work, so I think as I got older, I think it really made going to work not so burdensome, but, just something that's kind of a pleasure to do or something I enjoyed, because my earliest memories associated with work were really positive memories, if that makes sense.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a neat experience. At our house, we always talked about making barrels as kind of something it was always talked about with excitement and not so much, with any
It's not
type
actually
of,
work at that point.
No, we never talked about it. We never talked about it like that.
Now, don't be started, because Jimmy Russell always said, I've never worked a day in my life.
That's
Because
right.
It's always fun. Now,
Yeah.
have you actually worked a day in your life? Like,
There's been a few days I'd call work. Yeah, there's been a few days I'd call work.
So the kind of the history of barrels, in the 1800s, it was the forklift. It was what everybody used to transport things. We get in the early 1900s, we start seeing those go away a little bit. In one of my books, I found, in my research for one of my books, I found a stockpile of material from the cooperage lobbies. And they were basically trying to figure out ways to protect their interests. And one of them was to say, hey, why don't we lobby Congress a little bit to make, whiskey, bourbon, to be always aged in bourbon barrels or in new charred oak. Did your family have anything to do with that? I didn't see any Boswells.
Yeah,
on the
everybody
signature of
thinks
the
that's
letters.
some type of law we helped get put into place. But that was a congressman in Arkansas, I think, that put that into place, which we were present in the Ozarks. But no, our friend in Arkansas did that in 1964. Is that right?
Well, no. So
to make a regulation.
It was in the 1930s that it actually got on the federalized code.
All right.
But it was in 1964 that it became solidified and throughout the world, because we became a unique product in the United States, and it was kind of etched in stone at that point.
Well, it might have been my great grandfather, T.W. Boswell. He started cutting staves in 1912 down in the Mark Twain National Forest, which is in kind of the Ozarks, southern Missouri. So maybe he had something to do with that. I think he had 24 little stave mills all around the country. I think all the way from Missouri to South Carolina, my dad said. So.
I would love, if you have any old correspondence, I would love to see if we could find something cool, like a connection there, because how cool would that be that your lineage was actually what created, solidified bourbon.
Or you might not want to. It'd be like, that's like today's insider trading if you think about it.
Now, we've always been in the barrel business. That's just what we've done. And my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my dad, myself, my son, is in the business, working summers with his friends and learning the business from the ground up too. So I hope there is a connection, and I should look for that.
That'd be cool.
The other thing about it, though, is even if it was just dumb luck that they had to be new charred oak barrels, the thing is that what this whiskey does the first time it goes into a newly charred oak barrel is that it does get a lot more of those flavors than you would maybe get into the second, third, or fourth time, right? So I even if it was part of the law, I still think that the product would be better or different in different categories. Even if it was never if bourbon was never a thing, it was still whiskey.
Yeah.
But you would say this is a first time oak used whiskey.
And that was how they kind of referred to it in the 1800s. It was tradition, ended up becoming tradition, to use the new charred oak barrel, but people would try to imitate it in various ways. So the law is, the regulations are important because it keeps out, the imitators. And at that time, there were a lot of barrel makers, there were a ton of them, and they started going out of business. How has your family been able to, maintain business all these years? Because they went away largely.
Yeah, they did. I think, our typical, MO has just been to focus and just try to be the best in the world at one thing and not get too involved in other businesses, or, we figure we're maybe just smart enough to be good at the barrel business and maybe not smart enough to do everything else. So we've just kind of bared down and focused on the barrel business. And, my grandfather mostly did that. My dad really focused on the barrel business. Mm-hmm. And, I've been fortunate with a more buoyant market probably, but we had some little side businesses that I remember I was put in charge of the business of day-to-day operations. And I think that we had those side businesses sold within 3 months because I wasn't interested at all in it. I just wanted to, focus on what I knew best, and that was
What were those side businesses?
They're related. I mean, we've had different things. They're walnut bowls. It's crazy that, my grandfather made some giftware because, you had sawmills. He cut white oak. He'd also cut some walnut. And with that walnut, they'd make, giftware and walnut bowls, and it was woodworking.
Oh, okay.
And then
Wooden spoons, lots of spatulas.
And he made furniture. He made a little bit of furniture, and then he retailed it. So,
Yeah.
But, for the past 20, 25 years, it's just been focused on oak for wine and spirits. That's what we do.
Has whiskey always kind of been the hallmark for the company?
Absolutely. I'd say Kentucky bourbon is kind of the foundation of the business. I mean, my great-grandfather at the early turn of the century, he was making a lot of staves, and those were for beer barrels before the aluminum kegs. So, being from Missouri and Anheuser-Busch, there was some staves made for beer kegs. But then, for the past 80 years at least, since Prohibition, it's been, a lot of whiskey and then wine. Wine got more popular in the, 90s and early 2000s up to today.
So I also want to talk about the gravity of how big the operation is. And you don't need to name names of who you supply, but it's pretty much like across the board, a lot of places, right? I mean, I think people need to understand that when you think of the cooperage, there's only one other company out there that has their own. A lot of people got a source from you. There's other competition out there, but by far you're kind of at the top of the pyramid up here.
Well, I mean, I think we're fortunate to have a lot of good customers, and we do supply a lot of distilleries. I mean, a lot of the major distilleries we've been supplying since I was old enough to know who they were. We've always supplied a lot of these bigger distilleries. But it is interesting, they don't all take the same barrels. We make different barrels for different customers. So yeah, while we supply a lot of the major players and a lot of, even craft players, you'd be shocked today about how many different types of barrels we make bespoke barrels all the time. And that's kind of changed actually over the past 30 years. 30 years ago, my grandfather, he made more of just a container that met regulations, right? They had the regulations, the 1964 charred new oak cask. Maybe it's a white oak cask. But back, 30, 40 years ago, that was kind of what they did, or even 60 years ago. But in the past 10, 20 years, all these casks are not just charred oak barrels. They're made to certain specifications to give off certain organoleptic profiles for certain clients' style of whiskey. So, yeah, we supply a lot of people, a lot of the major players, but you'd be shocked about the differences between barrel to barrel, what they ask for.
Has the waiting list died down a little bit? Are you able to help everyone who comes to you? But I know that's a lot. But
yeah, I mean, really like in 2013, 2014, Fred was kind of a bit of a barrel panic. And most of that was driven by just supply of raw materials. Mm-hmm. So, we've got the raw materials under control. The industry does. So there's plenty of white oak staves that are being seasoned today to make the barrels. Never has been really like a barrel assembly or barrel making limitation. It's more been a raw material limitation.
Is there been a limitation from the people being able to harvest the trees though?
That's a great question. What happened was when there was what we call the Great Barrel Panic of 13 or 14, that was because the cooperage industry rebounded from the great financial crisis faster than the building trades did. So we needed wood. All the loggers were, out of work, or all the small sawmills had shut down because there was no demand for hardwoods because, people stopped building houses, stopped sawing lumber. I mean, 40% of the little sawmills went out of business. It's crazy. But all of a sudden now then the distillers are we need more barrels. We see this, great opportunity. And all the loggers, have sold their equipment, or are working at the car factory or something like that. So to get those people back into the woods, back into cutting, took time, and also took the market for other hardwoods to kind of come back.
Yeah.
Because white oak's only about 10% of the eastern hardwood forest, and of that 10%, we're only using about 2%. So right, we're using less than 2% of what a logger's harvesting. So we kind of need those other markets to have some life to them.
Yeah.
And once those markets got life, after we kind of got through that financial crisis, we rebounded, housing took back off, then guess what? Then, the stave logs started rolling again, and then supply caught up with demand. So, and it still is today. It's caught up.
Yeah, I mean, the supply and demand aspect has always been something that I find interesting because I think we had talked to somebody before, and they're saying, well, the cooperage industry doesn't really use that much when it comes to the wood. There's all this idea of, is there enough? Like, is there enough raw materials? And then on the other flip side, they're like, have you ever seen how much wood it takes to build a house?
Yeah.
Like that uses a lot more of the lumber. Am I wrong in that?
Again, we're using like less than 2% of the hardwood that's being pulled out of the typical forest in the eastern half of the United States. It is amazing. Like when my grandfather made staves, you would literally take a white oak log, right? And you would use saws that were like 3/4 of an inch thick. Cutting staves are like a little over an inch thick. So you'd almost have like a pile of sawdust, like in a pile of staves, about the same size, a lot of waste. And today, whenever we cut staves, we use blades that are 42 thousandths, 0.042 inches thick. So we have a tiny little pile of dust and a big pile of staves. So there's a lot better utilization of the resource today than there was, 100 years ago. And today, people are using alternative building materials,
Mm-hmm.
So there's probably overall less pressure on the forest. There is less pressure than there was even 100 years ago, just because of utilization, technology, alternative building materials. And also, if you think about it, there used to be forest fires in the eastern half of the United States. Today, there's very good control over forest fires.
They're on the other half of the United States.
Right, no, they're on the dry half, which is horrible and they're catastrophic and it's sad. But on the eastern part of the United States, you don't have these big 100,000 raging, fires.
Absolutely. So
the resources, overall, the resource is pretty healthy and stress is relatively low.
So I know there are people out there in construction that are probably going to wonder. So you talk about that blade. What's the life of that blade when you're running through here? I mean, are you replacing them like 2 a day, or do they actually last for like a year?
Oh, you can resharpen them and resharpen them and resharpen them. Sometimes, Sometimes if you have the right quality of steel, they can last a year.
Mm-hmm. Mm. So you're getting a lot of use out of them.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely.
So the other question, I kind of want to rewind a little bit back. You're talking about bringing on customers and figuring out their flavor profile. What do they want to find? Like what level of char? I want to talk about what does that process look like. So we'll take a page out of Fred's book, and we want to come out with the old Ascot brand.
It's a good brand, by the way. A lot of legacy behind it.
Yeah, $4,000 a bottle too. But anyway,
$5,000.
There you go. But what does that look like if you meet with us as potential new clients? Where do we start?
Well, we start by getting our vocabulary the same. Because what you call sweet, or what you call coconut, or what you call,
oh, you're totally screwed if you have Fred then, because he's gonna bring out all the depth of flavors that he's got,
which is great. But we have to kind of narrow it down to make sure we're talking the same language. Because if you're calling something, sweet, and I'm saying that's vanillin or vanilla-like, then it makes a difference to how we approach making the barrels. So, we first of all we get the language. So we have like kits, like this is kind of like a kit here, where we have like samples, of smoke. Or a sample here of, sweet, or like, vanilla or estery, and so we make sure we understand what we smell and what we taste, and then we're talking about the same thing. Then we just start narrowing down what your preference is. How much smoke do you want? How much vanilla character do you want? How much toastiness do you want? Do you want to remain estery and fruity, or do you want to be kind of fatter and more chocolate mocha, or, And so then once we start talking about language, then we'll start making samples, whether sample barrels or sample pieces of wood that are toasted and charred to what we think will work. And we start tasting and we start trialing. And then we kind of, start here and kind of narrow down until we get the profile exactly you want, that you desire.
And
whether it's for your existing, products, or for a new product or a new LTO or whatever.
And yeah, because I think the question is how long does that process take to say, well, we got to wait and age it and figure it out? Or do people just come in here and they're like, Brad, we just love to buy a bunch of number 4 char and we'll see you later?
Yeah. Well, I think it's changing. I think that a lot of times people used to be driven by marketing stories, and then they just kind of try to find the juice to work. But today they're trying to make really good juice, really good bourbon. And so we're starting more on the front end of the process more than ever with making quality, barrels for quality liquid. And then they come with a marketing story to kind of match that later. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's kind of evolved. It has evolved.
Kenny, one of the greatest, to me, one of the greatest stories in what I'd say cooperage history would be the creation of Maker's 46. And, that was a big part of my profile of Bill Samuels Jr. and Bourbon Plus. And it was also, it's been a bit, I've written about that a lot, but since we have Brad, I just want to tell us the story of how Makers 46 came about, what your role was in it, and what that was like for you.
Yeah, that was a great experience for me. It was Bill Samuels Jr. and Kevin Smith, asked me to come talk to them about, the possibility of making what is now Makers 46. And we had different languages, about what we wanted, and we didn't really mesh. So I had Dr. Jim Swan, if you knew Jim Swan, may rest in peace, but phenomenal guy in Scotland who had a lot to do with the whiskey industry and really, scientist and sensory guy. Anyway, he came to Loretta and met with me and Bill and Kevin, and we got our vocabulary aligned. And if you can imagine Bill Samuels Jr. sitting in a chair listening to people try to teach him vocabulary.
Bananas Foster in this one.
but he did. He sat down a bit for 8 hours the first day or whatever, and we went and talked about, to make sure we're all know what we're shooting for, that we understand the target, and that we're talking the same language. And that's how we started. And we did that for literally, it's pretty incredible to have the CEO of this, great brand and basically in the classroom with us, learning about, making sure the language was the same. So basically we learned the language of each other. Then we started talking about different experiments and did a lot of different experiments. I mean, big barrels, little barrels, staves, chips. I mean, all types of crazy stuff, trying to figure out where we want, what would get us to the target. And after 120 experiments and after probably 3,000 phone calls with Bill, all the way from his house to the cemetery between his house and Maker's Mark, he'd pull over and call me because he had good signal, and lots of trials. And we'd do blind tastings over the phone, blind tastings. So we'd send samples to different locations with different letters on them and start tasting through them until, after 18 months of that, we came up with what we all agreed met this profile, which Bill had set out really early in the process. So, Bill always said, let's keep the geniuses out of this and let's just do it. And kind of like a little skunks work project. Mm-hmm. And he did. And it was all about making things yummy. And day one, Bill's like, let's make it yummy. And we had to define yummy.
He does say that.
He does. Yeah, that's really what he said. That's exactly how it went. And then when we all hit yummy, and which was well defined, then we're like, wow, this is great. And then the challenges went on because then it was the wrong time of year to season the barrels, and so we learned more after that. But that was it was a pretty long process, very very extensive process, probably a little more technical than people might think. It wasn't an accident. I mean, it took a lot of stick-to-itiveness.
And I'll say too
which Bill has.
I'll say too that while that was a creation of a product, in my opinion, that was also kind of like a launch for you and Independent Stave, because that brought your company to the forefront and introduced regular everyday Joes to Independent Stave. Did you see was that a groundbreaking moment for the company to be so connected to a mainstream product like that?
Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point-of-sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. Shopify's point-of-sale is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. And with Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers in-line and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns, from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. And get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone. Transform your tablet into a point-of-sale system, or use Shopify's point-of-sale Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Plus, Shopify's award-winning 24/7 help is there to support your success every step of the way. Do retail right with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/bourbon, all lowercase, and go to shopify.com/bourbon to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/bourbon. If you're anything like me, then you can't get enough about bourbon. And that's why I'm a subscriber to Bourbon Plus magazine. Bourbon Plus is a quarterly publication that tells the stories from the heart of bourbon, the farmers who grow the grain, the distillers who labor over the process, and the people like you and me who raise their glasses to celebrate it all. Subscribe to Bourbon Plus magazine today at bourbonplus.com, that's PLUS.com, and use code PURSUIT at checkout for $5 off your subscription.
And I'll say too
Which Bill
that
has.
I'll say too that while that was a creation of a product, in my opinion, that was also kind of like a launch for you and Independent Stave, because that brought your company to the forefront and introduced regular everyday Joes to Independent Stave. Did you see was that a groundbreaking moment for the company to be so connected to a mainstream product like that?
Yes, it was. It was, absolutely. I'm, forever grateful for the experience, and Bill including me on the makers including me on the development. Also, got a chance to talk about and just learn about the industry through Bill and through all the time I spent with him. It was incredible. What was great was, we have a side of our business which is wine related. So we make wine barrels. We do oak for wine also, and there we learned a lot about. There's like 600,000 vintners in Italy, and they all want something different, and so over the years we've learned a lot about how to create different types of barrels in the wine industry, and it was great to bring that knowledge and some of that experience we had into the bourbon industry. And for sure, Bill is right at the forefront of that, and gave us a chance to kind of leverage our expertise into what's our core, into what's the foundation of our company. So it was a great opportunity. And today, people, it seems like, are talking a lot more about flavors. You talked about flavored whiskey earlier, and I think it's been great for the industry. I've heard people call it different things, call it kind of like a bonus or a gift and short term or whatever. But I do think, like with the Maker's 46, as we've gotten better at making different barrel profiles, barrels that have different organoleptic characters, we can add kind of these different flavor characters, which are very natural. And very integrated.
Absolutely.
Versus like when you're adding some flavorants, they're a little disjointed. But whenever you have a barrel that's made to a different standard, to taste differently, and the liquid's been there for 5, 6 summers and winters and hot and cold, it's very integrated and round, and it's a great way, I think, to create differences that are significant, but also very integrated and very natural. And
that's a hallelujah moment right there.
Mm-hmm.
Basically.
Yeah.
The barrel versus the artificial flavoring.
And don't you get the time and the temperature and all those reactions that take place over year after year, it gets mellow and comes together, kind of like a casserole.
Absolutely. You look like you're cooking for a question there, my friend.
You said casserole, and I'm like, oh man, doesn't sound too bad right now. So I kind of want to also shift to maybe have like an education little segment here.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people that listen to this, and they can look at bourbon on the shelves and they like the bourbon, they like what it is, yet they probably don't know the process in itself of what it even goes through from beginning to end. And I don't want to take up too much of time, but kind of talk about the time and process that it takes from actually getting the raw materials to slicing it up to seasoning it to the point where you're actually building the barrel, charring it, and then setting it on its way.
Absolutely. So the tree starts off as an acorn, and then about 100 years later, we have a tree that we harvest. And then after we cut that tree into small staves, the pieces that make the barrel, so say there's 30 or so staves around the barrel and 7 or 8 pieces in each end of the barrel, those staves will season. After we cut the log into staves, those staves will season from 6 months to 3 years. Sometimes more, but typically 3 years or less.
Now, talk about the reasoning why 6 months, 3 years, year
Yeah,
and a half.
absolutely.
Is there a science? Are you to the point where you can look at it and you can be like, that's it, that's ready?
We let the wood season on the yard and let Mother Nature work on the wood like the elements. So it's leaching of tannins, because tannins, which are the bitter tannins, which keep bugs from just destroying a tree or a piece of wood, those bitter tannins will leach out over time with water. Also, there will be microbial activity like mushrooms grow on the wood, and they'll put their tentacles down, they'll feed off the wood and break it down and make it more flavorsome.
So that's a good thing.
It's a great thing.
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, people talk about kiln-dried wood like it's evil. All kiln-dried wood stops that kind of degradation process. That's all it really does. So a lot of times you want to keep that degradation process going on and on and on and let Mother Nature do it rather than trying to just use fire to do it. Because fire degrades it also, right? But it's more extreme.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so we season the wood, create, let the mushrooms grow on it, break the wood down, make it flavorsome.
Some bird shit probably.
Yeah, well, yeah, but we clean up, we clean the wood off very good before we use it, and so then after it seasons, then we take it in the cooperage, and we'll toast the wood for sometimes up to an hour, and sometimes very little toasting, depends on the flavor you're seeking, and then we'll char it usually for around a minute. Less if it's really old seasoned wood, you might just flash chart. If you want to use different flavor profiles, you might chart for a real long time. And then within an hour, we can test it and ship it after that. It's interesting when we talk about making barrels and, a lot of times it's like kind of making, it's like mushrooms around a campfire. Marshmallows. Yeah, excuse me. I hope you edit this.
You know what? Yeah. I actually wouldn't mind like campfire mushrooms,
some nice portobellos to go to.
That sounds good, actually.
No, but it's kind of like marshmallows around campfire. So you put them on your stick, and some people like real slow toasting. Other times you like to just char it.
Yeah.
And you'd be shocked at how people just like it charred. And then a lot of people like it kind of just where it falls off the stick, and it's just toasted, not charred at all. And other people like it kind of like toasted for a little bit and then charred real fast, blow it out and enjoy it. And making barrels is not that simple, but it gives you an idea about how we actually do cook the barrels.
It's a pretty good analogy.
Yeah, it's kind of, yep.
I was gonna get into the different types of oak. Right now you are playing with a lot of different oak. Give us kind of like a flavor and scientific look at the differences between like American oak, French oak, Japanese oak, just the various oaks that you're playing with right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so American oak is the most common oak used for whiskeys and bourbon. I mean, it's almost all American oak or is. And, with American oak, what comes to the forefront is more the vanilla, creamy character, some of the whiskey lactones, which people associate with like coconut. Sometimes we'll talk about lactones being kind of like a copper tan lotion character, kind of like coconut character. And you get a lot of that with French oak, but you also get more tannins with French oak. It has a much higher natural tannin content with French oak, and you lose the lactones. So those lactones sometimes add kind of like a creamy layer, kind of a nutty, creamy layer to the wood that you don't get so much with French oak. But you still get nice, sweet balance from the French oak as well, kind of spiced up a bit with the tannins. You can get a little more cinnamon, brown spices with the French oak, and a little more of the creamy, nutty balance with the American oak.
How long?
And then the other oaks are a little more slanted towards the French oak side of the equation. American oak's kind of the outlier when it comes to the lactones.
How long were these experiments going on that you figured this out? Or like, when did you do it? Was this something that your dad figured out? Or is this something that you've kind of brought into the fold to figure it out?
No, I think my dad really started it. I mean, my grandfather, again, he was a wonderful business person. He made great barrels. But, back 60 years ago, 70 years ago, bourbon was a little more of a commodity. And then my dad recognized that it was going to be, people were not just going to call for bourbon and soda, but they were going to call by brand, by maybe sometimes by warehouse or by, all these different unique offerings you could have in bourbon. And so he started, really learning about oak, and that applied to the wine business big time, where he learned more about what makes, what species taste good with what type of wine or with what type of spirit, and how long we should age the wood, and how that affects the whiskey, or how we should toast or char, and how that affects it. So my father really started it, and we've just kind of built upon it. So we have full-time food scientists in our company, and chemists and research people that are focused on wine or spirits. I mean, it's
food scientists. That's what we missed out on.
We have a good food scientist, Dr. David Jodra. Yeah.
Awesome. I think we're pretty close though.
Yeah. I mean, I made ribs last night.
I drank bourbon. That's food science.
So another question about just the customer aspect as well, because you got a cooperage here in Kentucky. You've also got one in Missouri. Mm-hmm. And
what cities are those in again?
Lebanon.
So
saves on postage.
Are Are you only setting up cooperages in towns called Lebanon?
Yeah, and we have a stave mill in Salem, Missouri, and one in Salem, Indiana, too. So how about that?
So he's branching out.
Yeah. Salem's and Lebanon's.
But for anybody that you go out, you go to a rick house, it's pretty easy to define these because you look at the barrel rings and they're going to have either a KY in the studs, will have an MO in it. Mm-hmm. Now, do you have customers that say, I only want ones that say KY, or I only want ones that say MO, or are they just like, Brad, we got a shortage. I don't give a shit. Just send me some barrels. No.
I mean, there's certain things we can do in Missouri or Kentucky that are somewhat unique. We can make certain types of barrels at each cooperage, the exact same, line them up side by side. Every aspect is, the flavor, structural integrity is the same. But there's some things we can do in Kentucky and some things we can do in Missouri that are unique to each cooperage. So people will take advantage of those. And so sometimes they'll order a barrel that we can't make in Kentucky, a special barrel, or they might order a special barrel we make in Missouri that we can't, or vice versa. So yeah, the cooperages have some unique capabilities. But now then, of course, they can also have the ability to make, the barrels that have the same characteristics.
Now, the next question we're going to ask, right?
Sure.
Well, what can one do versus the other can't?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So the cooperage, it's great. I mean, Fred's been with me to the cooperage in Missouri, and it's kind of like, the Disney World of oak. I mean, we make all kinds of barrels for bourbons and wines and tequilas and rums and pisco and shochu and all these different types of barrels. And so it's a very complex, offering of barrels there, where in Kentucky, we make more like 10 or 12 types of barrels primarily. So
it feels, it's very highly technological too, but it's technological in a way that you don't think of modern technology. And there's all of these pieces of equipment that are designed to make a barrel get together like a quarter of an inch or, a millimeter of an inch or something like that closer together. It's fascinating. It's a really fascinating journey. And the coolest part is you have to wear headphones and he talks into like a mic that you hear all through. So it's kind of like,
being a tourist overseas when you got to join the group.
Far more advanced. It's like, backstage level headphones. So it's kind of like Brad's got his own little walking podcast with you.
There you go.
Yeah. It's you need to come back.
I do.
Bring Kenny with you.
Yeah, I'll come. I'll check it out. But another question about that. So I work in tech, and you've got this idea of manufacturing and having a process that is repeatable, that is able, that you can basically streamline a lot. However, it seems like you guys are really focused on innovation. So why even go towards innovation and not just saying like, listen, like here's 4 buckets. Choose one of these buckets because that's all you're getting. We're not going out of our way to do anything else. Like why even keep going down the innovation route?
Yeah, that's a great question. I remember I was with a client one time and he had this offering, and it was like a 12,000 case offering. And he worked with a capsule company to have a certain shade of yellow on his capsule. I'm like, okay, we can make bespoke barrels for that program just as well. Trust me, we're not going to just say here's what we have. We hope you like it. Mm-hmm. That's not our philosophy. So instead of saying here's what we have, we hope you like it, we always say, what do you want? What do you need? And then we'll make it for you. And so. Again, I mean, 30 years ago, the barrels were kind of like made, put in a warehouse, and we draw out, and people want, 1,000 barrels. Here's your barrels. Today, the barrels are pretty much all made to order because of that. Because, we don't try just to say, here's what we have. We hope you like it. We try to say, what do you need? What do you want? And then we'll make that for you.
Wow.
What's your target? Mm-hmm. What's your objective? We'll help you meet that objective.
What are the core states? I know we said the eastern United States, but it's typically the Ozarks. Are there any other core states you're harvesting from right now?
Yeah, our 2 largest are Missouri and Kentucky.
Okay,
but also there's good oak like around Ohio. We have a mill in southern Indiana. Western Tennessee, we get a lot of good oak. So yeah, but Missouri and Kentucky are the 2 largest.
So Kenny, I actually used to work in the forestry industry before I got into bourbon, and
I learned something new about you every day.
That they used to call me Forestry Fred. I used to write tech stories on it was in the pine industry, but I still follow forestry. It's like one of my hobbies. And Oregon oak and Gariana oak is got like, it's kind of like a controversial thing going on with it, like in terms of what they call it. And on the West Coast, the West Coast foresters are very particular about that. Explain to the audience what Oregon oak is or Gariana oak is, and like how it's being applied in whiskey today.
Yeah, I mean, we don't do a lot with Gary oak or Quercus Gariana. My grandfather, I think in the 1970s, really studied that a lot, and we've made barrels with it. But I mean, I don't think it's like a mainstream oak that you're going to use for all your programs. I mean, I think that its attributes are unique and creates a point of difference. And I think that works great for the people that use it, and that, but generally we've just not gotten real involved in it. It's just commercially available. It's just not, it's a much smaller amount of it that's out in Oregon that's, commercially available. But
it's also, is it sexy though? I don't feel like it's like, it skews a little bit like French oak, but it just, to me, the whiskey that's coming from it's just not doing it for me.
Yeah, I don't,
he's not going to comment.
I'm not going to comment. I've got good clients.
I'm not trying for that,
but it definitely has different flavor profile. Some people would say a little more tannic, than say what a normal American oak would have. Quercus alba.
So we get, which is what a little sciencey there.
I like that. But you said the word sexy, and whenever you see somebody that says like, "Oh, this is aged in French oak," you're like, "Oh, it's French. It's French. It's got to be, it's got to be better." But I think that's kind of like a misconception. It seems like, depending on what the flavor profile you're trying to gain out of it, right? But is there? I'm assuming that just American white is a good chunk of what you are pumping out here.
Yeah, the vast majority of. I mean, it's just not to get too technical, but there's like 7 species of white oak and Quercus alba.
Let's get technical.
All right. Well, Quercus alba is what we really do use. There's like chinkapin oak, or there's chestnut, white oak, or there's post oak, and there's a bunch of different species. But we try to stick with just pure white oak for a lot of reasons. It's not just flavor, but also for structural integrity. So.
Now, do you also have like?
But we do have. We have a mill in France, in northeast France, in the Vosges forest, and we're sourcing French oak every day, and we still source wood from Slovakia also for certain programs. We have customers that want European oak, so I mean, it's not just American oak.
Real cool.
Yeah, and sometimes we keep our oak separate from Appalachia to the Ozarks, and we'll create separate lots and make barrels from only one appellation and stuff like that. So I mean, even though it's American oak is our kind of our mainstay, but I mean, we source oak from Eastern Europe. We have our own mill in France, and then we'll keep our lots within America separate at times to create different points of difference.
What's the wackiest spot you've gotten an oak tree from?
China. That's pretty hard to get oak from. It's hard to from Siberia. Yeah,
it's hard to mail something to China.
Yeah,
I mean, you can't get it from China.
We've done some, we've sourced some crazy oak over the years from all different countries, and people have asked us to make barrels of oak from different origins, which you couldn't imagine, just because, they're just trying to make themselves different also. Mm-hmm. So
now, one thing that
we made barrels, and we've tasted probably 100 different species of wood over the years.
It's someone's got to do it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
One of the things that has changed for you in the last 10 years has been tourism.
Mm-hmm.
You've really pressed, educating, the consumer populace, through tourism. What has that been like, and what is the future for Independent Stave from the tourist side?
Great question. I mean, for us, we're just B2B. So we're just, my customers are distilleries and wineries, and that's it. So we're not really trying to bring tourism to the cooperages or to our sites for direct commercial value. But we do feel like whenever we bring our clients, which are the consumers, so when we bring bourbon drinkers to the Kentucky cooperage, to our Kentucky cooperage, that experience they'll never forget. And when they go to a bar or when they go to the store to buy a bottle of something, we think that that's going to help sway their decision to buy bourbon instead, because they'll remember their experience at Kentucky cooperage. I mean, I think, we still have like photo opportunities here, like with barrels or fire. And I think when that goes on your bar at home and you're going back behind the bar to get a bottle for your friends and you see that picture, you might reach for the bottle of bourbon rather than the bottle of vodka or gin.
Yeah.
And I hope you do, right? I mean, that's my family's business. I mean, and so I think it makes a difference over time. I think, thousands of people per year times, 10 or 20 years times all their friends, and people start talking about bourbon. We help add to that conversation for the consumer. That's what we're trying to do. So really, it's just trying to help our customers sell more bourbon and reach more consumers. And hopefully, we also benefit by being able to, grow our business.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
So the other thing we had talked about the process and just the generic side of it, but we've talked a lot about the innovations. Talk about some of the experiments that you have done that have been successful. We touched on makers for one, but what are some other ones? Everybody's kind of familiar with chars 1 through 4, but kind of go a little bit deeper. What are other things that you guys are experimenting with or playing with?
Yeah, I think we've been very, you ask about Missouri versus Kentucky, or cooperage in Missouri versus Kentucky. Well, in Missouri, we have which Fred's seen, we have a big area where we toast barrels, and every barrel is like hooked up to a computer, and we're measuring the time and the temperature of that barrel. We're measuring the temperature of that barrel against time all the time throughout the process, and creating these very unique flavor profiles by controlling temperature over time. And, we can't toast enough barrels like that. If you talk about, well, is there limitations, or is there a waiting list for barrels? For some of those really long toast barrels or specially toasted barrels, that's kind of taken off. And it's not because they're really better, they're just different, And especially as people are starting to do some more like finishing projects, and, there's a real demand for how can we make a barrel that's kind of really unique. That might be a extra long toast or extra hot toast or a special hand toast, or sometimes toasted with a different species of wood, not just oak. Maybe you want a hickory toasted barrel, stuff like that. So those unique toasted offerings have gone pretty wild, and it's a lot of fun because I like food and I like different types. I like whiskeys, I like wines, I like to experiment, and so that's all very much in that same vein. So it's a lot different than 40 years, 50 years ago. People just send a barrel down the line.
So speaking of those cool experiments, in all these brands out there today are finished in brandy barrels or cognac barrel, or that is brandy, or different wine barrels, or they have special toasts, or they're double oaked or whatever. And you're helping all those. Do you ever get like one of your customers calling you up and saying, they're copying us, or they're you have to walk a fine line there when you're doing helping?
Yeah, absolutely. We have what we call silos, and we keep information for customers in those silos, and we don't share with other people. And we'll sign NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, not just saying we will, but put it on writing that we will protect this, these experiments.
I can vouch for that because I've tried to get information from him before on various things. Like, I can't say.
Yeah,
so.
No, we know that we don't ever bite the hand that feeds you, and so these customers have been so good to us. We protect all that. You're just in our library, and you saw the bins. You can't even see through.
Yeah, there's
translucent panels protecting.
And I noticed there was a electric shock.
That's
wire
right.
If you try to
and
touch
there's cameras,
barbed wire that's around it.
Cameras, barbed wire, shocking. Yeah, we protect all that. Almost with our life, because barrels are not our life, but they're important to us.
Very important.
Yeah.
So we had talked about experiments. With experiments, there are sometimes failures. So has there ever been a failure that a whiskey was aged in something you're like, guys, I don't think this one should go out to market? Like,
oh yeah, we've had some disasters. Yeah, we bought a bunch of like chestnut oak about 30 years ago and made a bunch of barrels, and that didn't work so good. After a couple of years, those barrels looked like
Talk about it.
They were sweating. They sweated most of the whiskey out of them. So no matter how they tasted, it didn't work so well. So we tried different species we thought would have different flavor attributes that people would like. And then the thing that's strange about barrels is problems with barrels will kind of rear their ugly head later in the process. So you can do some trials like right off the bat and try to get some direction. They look like they're liquid tied, or you think they're going to taste a certain way. Then 2, 3, 4 years later, things changed drastically. Whether the whiskey soaked farther into the wood and then found veins that were open, or whether just too much tannin came out of the wood and just destroyed the character, or whether after certain elements of the wood were neutralized with the oxidation. Things change. So yeah, we've had a lot of experiments that we thought were great, and some things even gone commercial. We thought they were great, And like 2 years later, like, not so great. What a disaster. Wasted, thousands of hours of times. But, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So
how can you control some of those variables? Like, is there a scientific process where you've kind of nailed down and say, like, we know that we can't go this route because of X, Y, or Z?
Yeah, no, we definitely have a better understanding what the outcomes will be today based on past experiences. I mean, basically we would have like an experimental grid that we've created about what works and what doesn't work with wood species or toasting or charring. And that grid we've created over the past, really say 30 years of hardcore experimentation is very helpful when it comes to avoiding pitfalls.
So it's like a minesweeper grid. You click
it's kind of like that.
You click on it and you're like, oh, we didn't hit
don't
the bomb.
go there. Don't go
hit the
there.
bomb yet. We're at the threes. We're looking good right here.
Don't try these two variables together because that does not work.
There was Buffalo Trace did an experiment a few years ago that I thought was like, they do that series for interest, but they did one where they charred the wood for like 4 minutes, and they said like the barrel was still barely holding together, and they aged the whiskey in it. Like, and I've always wondered, like, what's the longest? Is that the longest you can char a barrel? Is 4 minutes, 4.5 minutes?
Yeah, when you start going like over 3 minutes, 4 minutes, I mean, the barrel actually becomes like when you put the hoops on it, it looks like an hourglass.
Oh wow!
It's like plastic deformation, right? It keeps that shape, and the hoops will actually indent. And the barrel will look like that, where the hoops are. So, yeah, I mean, anything over about 4 minutes, Fred, you're going to start having a horrible time keeping the whiskey in the barrel.
It's keeping the whiskey in the barrel. How many times can you actually use a barrel until it's no good anymore? Do you guys have researched that part?
Yeah, I mean, barrels are used, for 60, 70. Go to southern Spain, there's barrels that are 100 years old, sherry barrels. So, I mean, I was in Australia, actually, and had some port. I think, it was port because we had our 100th anniversary in 2012 was our 100th anniversary, and I got a gift of some port that was 100 years old, just taken out of the barrel.
How was it?
Impossible to drink.
Oh, really?
It was nice to collect, but it was so tannic and so thick. You could pour like syrup out of the bottle, kind of. But
port is a dessert drink. So.
Yeah. But you're right. But
it's like it's almost like Jello at this point.
Yeah, there wasn't much sweetness left in this.
If you ever needed any evidence that Brad was a whiskey guy, you just got it. Yeah. I mean, he just said the 100-year-old port wasn't that good. And most people would be like, oh my God, it was this, it was that.
Yeah. No.
He's a whiskey man.
Well, it's good. We need more whiskey people out there.
Absolutely.
That's what keeps us driving.
Amen.
Yeah. So, Brad, I think that's going to kind of wrap it up unless you had any more kind of follow-up questions, but...
I got to say, I'm really excited about where things are headed in American whiskey. And everybody at this table here is connected to whiskey in some way. We always talk about the boom ending. And you are very close to it. Do you see, in your opinion, where are we with the growth of American whiskey?
Well, I think that the consumption is going to continue to grow. I think that people are interested in the authenticity of bourbon. I think that, globally, that's where the real opportunity is. I mean, if we're wrong globally, if the people outside the United States do not embrace bourbon, then there's going to be too much bourbon around pretty soon. But we do think that youth today, young people, legal drinking age, young people, like the flavor profile of bourbon. It's a little sweeter, it's a little more flavorsome than, say, some of the other types of whiskeys out there. And I think that's not just in America. I think that's around the world.
Right.
So I think those people will embrace it and will enjoy the cocktail culture and how mixable bourbon is and just bourbon neat, the characters it gives. So I think that it will take off internationally. But if it doesn't, Fred, then we're going to have, I think as Chuck one time said, we're going to have an ocean of, we can have an ocean of bourbon. I mean, but there's still, the baseline today is so much better than it was, 10 years ago. That I'm really thankful for that anyway. I mean,
yeah.
And you're one of the biggest reasons behind it.
Huge.
I think it's very awesome to be able to do this and capture that information and kind of capture as well as your family's history and legacy to be able to bring it to the thousands of people that want to listen to this and kind of understand that what you're doing is actually playing the biggest part of what they're drinking every single day.
Yeah, I mean, 50 to 75% of the flavor right there. There's not a distiller who will dispute that. The one Maker's Mark will say Greg Davis's used to say that, the barrel makes about 50% of it. So the estimates are between 50 and 75% is what the flavor of bourbon is from the barrel.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just lucky to be part. We're lucky to be part of the boom, So we're really, really, really fortunate that for me, it was a once in a generation opportunity to be part of this boom. So
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty fortunate.
Well, we can only wish you just more success from here, right?
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. So if people want to know more about Independent Stave, I'm assuming go to the website.
Absolutely, yeah. www.independentstavecompany, all spelled out, .com.
And they can find tourism, like how to book.
That's right.
Tour. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. We come visit the Kentucky cooperage and see how barrels are made. It's a real authentic experience. You literally walk into the cooperage and you might walk out a little dust on you and a little smoke, and you'll see how barrels are made firsthand.
Awesome.
Very, very raw experience then. Absolutely.
Yeah. By design. Yeah.
Really awesome. So again, thank you again for coming on the show today. It was a pleasure to have you, and make sure you go try to get out to Lebanon and actually see the cooperage.
It's a pretty cool town too, and it's one of our state's few federal cemeteries too. So if you like looking at that sort of thing, there's a lot of American heroes buried here. So
there you go.
It's a great town to visit.
Now you got 2 reasons to come.
Yeah.
So absolutely, make sure you follow Bourbon Pursuit as well as Fred Minnick on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. If you haven't done so yet, make sure you subscribe to Bourbon Plus, the world's best bourbon magazine that's out there. So, I know. I try to keep putting you on a pedestal over here, Fred. And if you do like the show, you want to hear more great guests like this, support us, patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit. And if you want any more show suggestions, ideas, fan mail, hate mail, whatever it is, send it to us, team@bourbonpursuit.com. With that, gentlemen, thanks again for joining the show, and we'll see everybody next week.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks.